have the privilege of speaking with Sheriff Derrick Cunningham from the Montgomery, Alabama Sheriff's Office. His time in the law enforcement profession with the Montgomery Police Department spans over 30 years. In 1989, at the young age of 21, he graduated from the police academy. 10 years later, he joined the Detective Division, investigating homicides, where he later became a member of the International Homicide Investigators Association. In 1999, he was appointed Chief Deputy. He served in this capacity for 15 years until he was sworn in January 2015 as the county's 39th sheriff and Montgomery's first African-American sheriff. Sheriff Cunningham is a graduate of FBI NA, class 231 or 231, I believe. He's retired from the Alabama National Guard with over 24 years of service and serves as a point of contact for Homeland Security for Montgomery County, overseeing funding for the county. For several years, he has served on the board of directors of several nonprofit agencies and has been among the most visible supporters of community-based policing, youth mentoring programs, and utilizing smartphone and other technology to better serve the community and reduce crime. Sheriff, it is my pleasure to have you here to bring your unique value to this conversation. And so I'd like to begin by asking, what was your reason for joining the law enforcement industry?
Well, when I first came into the law enforcement, I was really coming to visit my brother who lived in Montgomery. He worked here, and I used to just come by and visit. Then one day I was just watching TV, and they were advertising for the Montgomery Police Department. And I said, if you feel that you can be one of the best, I jumped on it and I decided to apply, and I applied, and who would have thought that I'd be where I'm at today? So, yeah.
Excellent. And describe your unique experience as an African-American serving in the law enforcement industry. I think it is a fantastic accomplishment to say that you are the first African-American sheriff within Montgomery, Alabama. I think that's no small feat. For me to be able to speak with you is history in the making, in my experience.
Yeah.
So I'd love to know your experience in your own words, then versus now.
Well, I guess if you look at my experience and you look at Montgomery, which is the birthplace of the civil rights movement, this is where Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, and all of those Black pioneers that pretty much paved the way for me to be able to be sheriff. This is where they live. This is where they work, and it's something when you can come down the street and you pass by Martin Luther King's house and you pass by where Rosa Parks lived. I mean, it's something that when you talk about Montgomery, you talk about the birthplace of the civil rights, and then being a Black in law enforcement is something that I guess it's eye-opening. It's something that now that you can really say that I tried, and I want to make sure everything I did to pave a path for those coming behind me. And so this is it's a job, but at the same time, it's a job where I think now we have changed the culture in law enforcement here in Montgomery, because now it's not just every face that you see, they all look alike. We all look different, and we come from different aspects, but at the same time, we're trained alike, and we know what the job entails. So, it's a good job. It's a great job. And I'm just glad that I'm in this position.
And we are glad that we are able to speak with you and to be able to share with you in your joy and your accomplishments, definitely. Even with my introduction of you, that is just touching the surface of what you have done for Montgomery, Alabama. You kind of touched on it a little bit, but I'd love to hear a little bit more on what you believe were the strides that have been made as it relates to acknowledging diversity in the police force, and what improvements are still needed to progress.
Well, right now, we in law enforcement, we're fighting against, not only are we fighting against the stigma that we have in law enforcement, but now we got to fight against social media, and you're looking at what the television portrayed law enforcement as. I mean, just about every law enforcement television series, there's always a corrupt, or there's always a racial disparity, as it relates to our job, and it relates to building that bridge with the community. So we always have to make sure that everything we're doing it with a good, clean heart, and we're doing it because this is the way that we were trained to do it. And so the struggles is that we're trying to recruit, and we're trying to bring in people into this profession. And right now with the millennials, the only thing they can compare this job to is something they've seen on YouTube or something that they've seen on social media. So with that stigma, I mean, if you got a bad apple in Pennsylvania, that same bad apples in Alabama, the way that the millennials see that. So when you start talking about diversity and trying to work around that, it's hard in today's environment. I mean, you can't try to run this agency sitting in your office. You got to push back from your desk. You got to go out. I was at a high school this morning talking to some students about the choices and about decision making. But that's some of the things that we got to do. We can't wait until they graduate. We got to get them while they're still in school and help try to turn them into our direction and hide or try to explain some of the stigma that's out there concerning law enforcement as it relates to young people. And so, this is a struggle for us in law enforcement. It's more of a struggle for a Black man in law enforcement, because these are the stigmas that my community, this is how they're labeling me in the communities that look like me. And so we got to always make sure that what we're doing it with a clean heart, and then we're able to explain this to our young people so they can better understand what this job is about.
I agree with you. I think when I had spoken with you in person at the National Sheriff's Association conference, that we had mentioned in passing about how the recruitment efforts had kind of be doubled down on because of the wave of racial conflicts as well as political views. And of course, you mentioned the generation and how they view the force in general. It's changing. And that kind of segues to the next question I had for you. A wave of Black law enforcement officers are reaching retirement age. And in addition to this, the political tensions have affected the community's relationship with law enforcement. How have your recruitment efforts been affected, and what are you actively doing to combat this challenge?
Well, what we had to do, we had to jump from outside the boundaries and get out into the mist. When I say get into the mist, we can't continue to do the things we've always done. And so what we've been doing now is going to the high schools. I'm trying to grab you when you're coming out of high school, at least bring you into this profession and under a cadet status or under an explorer status. And then at least I can get you into this profession. And the best part about this profession now, what we had to do, we had to go back and we had to see what do the millennials want. The majority of them want to go to school. The majority of them don't have the scores on the SAT and the ACT to be able to get that paid education. So the majority is going to be sitting out here trying to get a student loan, trying to get this, just to be able to continue their education. So what we did here is we started paying for college. You come to work here, we're going to pay for your education. You just got to agree to give me a couple years after you get that degree. And so that changes a lot of the stigma as it relates to young people. Now I can go into a high school, I can recruit a young person. I mean, just a young person that has the skills that we want and we want to see in our agency. I can bring them in as a cadet. They can come in, join our workforce, and start working for us, learning this profession. And at the same time, I'm paying for their education. So they're coming in at 18. By the time they make it to 21, hopefully they're just about to graduate college. And then they'll be able to come in, not only come in on at the bottom, but we give pay incentives for people that come in with advanced degrees. So you come in with a bachelor's, you'll probably come in with a 2-step pay raise, a master's, a 3-step pay raise. But you gotta come outside the box and do things that you've never done before in order to grab them young and to lead them into this profession and let them know this is a good profession. And it's been working, knock on wood. Yeah, we've been able to grab some good ones and to be able to pull them in here. And not only that, you got to keep your salaries close to where the general salaries are at out here. If you're going to work in a plant shouldn't pay more than what a law enforcement officer makes. We should be on the same playing field, and we got to make sure that we keep our salaries abreast of what's going on in our community so that we want to be attractable to young people. And that's what we started doing. And so the only way that you're going to be able to do that and to be able to bring people in, you still got to help go educate them about the dangers of student loans. I mean, I interview people that come in $100,000, $200,000 worth of debt, and you just graduated college with a BS, not a master's, a BS, and you got over 160, close to $200,000 worth of debt because you use that student loan for other things besides your education. We wasn't educating our young guys and girls of the dangers of getting this money and just buying cars, getting luxury apartments and all this stuff. So now they're coming out in debt, and that's some debt that you're going to be paying for the next 15 to 20 years. So you got to help educate them in high school, and then hopefully they'll turn to you and your agency before they go out and get themselves in so much debt and so much trouble that they're not going to be marketable when they do graduate.
I think it's definitely admirable, Sheriff Cunningham, that you have really zoomed in on the needs of your target demographic, millennials, to really see, and really, it sounds based on what you're saying that you really are paying attention to what their needs are and speaking to them on the same level to be able to acknowledge that they are having some issues financially, but also to guide them in how to combat those issues, as well as providing a resource so that if it is education that they want to pursue, that they're able to both serve their country and also advance their education, like it can go together. I think that's definitely a great approach to start in that direction to really see how can we make it a relationship where we're both benefiting. And so if both of you are able to gain value, that's definitely a good place to start. In light of the recent events, for example, the George Floyd protests in 2020 and the storming of the Capitol in 2021, how do you manage or navigate your role as sheriff and alliances during times of conflicts such as these?
Well, when the George Floyd incident took place, you had all of your protests, and you got to let your community know where you stand. What happened to him, it shouldn't have happened. I don't care that you law enforcement or not, right from wrong. And that I'm not going to sit here because I feel like I'm one of them. I'm one of the police, and we got to, make sure, no, wrong is wrong. And you got to be able to let people know, no, it's wrong. Mm-mm. You know, I got to look at, you're looking at a culture right now that I got young nephews. It could have been one of them. I got brothers, I got uncles, dads, you know, it could have been one of them. You know, right is right and wrong is wrong. And that was wrong. You know, I can't embrace that. I can't try to embrace that. So you got to let the community know how you feel. And that's one of the things I did. I came out and talked to that. Hey, that's wrong. He needs to be prosecuted. You know, I'm sorry. And ain't nothing I could say about it. I couldn't sit back and watch and sit back and say, wow, you know, I was just as disgusted as everybody else was. But there's a day in court. There's a day for all that to be handled. And so, but as long as you are open with your community and the community knows how you feel about certain situations, you know, there's a lot that you just can't cover up with and try to say that I agree with it. And what happened on January 6th was just crazy. Who in their right mind would ever thought of something like that? And for to sit here and watch it on TV, and you know that we're in the United States of America, and what they did, that was crazy. I've never seen nothing like that in my entire life. Every time I've been to the Capitol, you got to go through a screening process to get in, and you got to have a reservation. You got to have all of this, and they took the laws out of everybody's hands, and they made this whole event about themselves. And so they should be punished. Yes, we need to send a clear message back that if you do it again, you're going to go to jail again. You know, stuff like that, we shouldn't tolerate. I'm not going to sit here and say we got sugar-coated. We shouldn't smile at them like, oh, they knew better. They knew better. And so I'm sorry. What makes that any different from the George Floyd incident? Nothing. You know, it was wrong. And when something is wrong, say it's wrong. And you can't make it sound good, look good, sugarcoat it, dress it up. It's still going to be wrong. So, and I think if the community knows that that's your feelings, not only on the 6th, which really made it so bad is that they took on law enforcement. They were fighting the law enforcement officers, telling them to get back, get out. And, you know, and with some of the threats and some of the things that happened to some of those officers, no. I can't sit back and stomach it and say, yeah, well, you know, they made a mistake. No, these were grown men and women. They knew better. Same way with George Floyd. Those were grown men that knew better. So.
Definitely. Being able to speak on issues like this and just being able to denounce something right as wrong, you know, as clear as day. Some persons in positions of power may have some difficulties doing that, but I am glad to see that you are able to create a stance, a healthy stance, and stand behind what you have said, as well as also to remember your role and how the part you play in events like this. With that being said, law enforcement diversity has been linked to lessened policing disparities. How important is it to have a diverse police force for you?
Very important. If your agency don't look like your community, how you gonna go out and police a community and it is not diverse like your community? You know, you got to have your females, you got to have your males, you got to have your African Americans, you got to have your white, you got to have your Hispanics. I mean, you got to have all facets. When you recruit, you got to recruit all facets. And, you know, this is a culture change for a lot of different people. And we're going through that culture change. But at the same time, this agency needs to represent that community that you're policing. You know, we got to be able to change with the times. And when you start talking about the diversity, that's when your implicit biases come out and you start seeing a lot of that in our agencies. And that's something that you got to educate your people on. In today's times, we you can't be vocal. I can't sit here and look at you uh, in a in an unusual way because of either your religious, your sexual, or whatever your biases that I have against you. I should be displaying that. I shouldn't be vocal. I shouldn't feel like I need to be vocal. This is a free country. This is a free society. And you got to let people live their lives the way that they want to live their lives. It ain't for me to be judgmental and tell you how to live your life and the things that I ain't supposed to approve you or disapprove you. I'm here to get people to do this job. And I don't care about all that other stuff. I care about the job. You come here and get the job done, that's what I care about. We got policies and procedures in place. And I always tell my guys and girls, hey, you just go by the policies and procedures. I ain't worried about all that other stuff. And all that other mumble jumble that you like to say at home, you might want to keep it at home. Here, we all the same. We all wear the brown, so we all the same. We all twins. And if you can't see that, if you can't feel that, this may not be the place for you, because this is a whole new century. We're dealing with some millennials right now that we're trying to educate them and help them be on the right path to be able to come in here to take this profession forward. This is going to be a dying profession if we think we got to get people a certain way and talk the same, look the same, and act the same. Nah, that ain't going to happen. And we're changing that. And it's changing every day. And that's why you as leaders, we got to be the ones to sit back and say, no, hey, we need to look at that policy. Policies ain't written so that they're not able to be changed or implement or updated, because every day you're going to update something and change something because there are new laws every single day. So you got to be able to change with the times as well.
Being able to be dynamic and also to look at current events, look at the needs and wants of your citizens is very important. And I'm glad that this is at the forefront of your decision making, and your approach to policy is admirable. The next question I had for you, Sheriff, was what are your thoughts on the public's views on defunding the police and taking money to allocate it elsewhere, or some people phrase it as reimagining what the task force looks like? What are your views on that?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. Yesterday, they asked me about defunding the police. And I told them, I said, well, we already defunded enough. How much more can you defund me? If you look at our job and you look at the tasks that we have to do, I mean, right now we're mental health caseworkers, we're mental health workers. We deal with the people that are going through alcoholism. We're looking at the drug addicts. We're looking at the sex addicts. We deal with all of that on a daily basis, every single day. Yes, you could take money and put it into something else, but every time we have this conversation, we want to come up or reinvent the wheel as it relates to, well, we shouldn't let law enforcement go out on this call. And now we're seeing more and more violence in America, nationwide. We've never, ever heard of a mass shooting, but now just about once a week, we see where 4 or 5 people were shot, 2 or 3 people getting killed at the same time. We never really heard of that back in the day. That's what we're starting to see now. There's no way in the world that you can remove law enforcement. You're going to have law enforcement go out regardless of what the situation may be. I sit back and I listen and I just smile because there's no way in the world that you can create a society right now and you're going to take law enforcement out of it and we're going to put in social workers into it and just remove law enforcement. I just don't see that happening. we can try all of that. We can try to do all of this. But just like here in Alabama, we got a big push on permitless carry, doing away with permits and just let everybody carry guns. That's the thing. So are you telling me that you're going to send in a licensed therapist into a area where a person is already in crisis mode, and you don't know if the person has weapons, or you don't know if it's exposed to weapons, and you're going to send somebody in that's going to be able to talk their way or talk that person out of that crisis mode? Yeah. And that's why we have crisis intervention training for law enforcement. We go through all of that, all the steps of being able to de-escalate a situation. That's what we're being trained to do now. But, back in the day, you never heard of law enforcement going through de-escalation training. When I first started, mental health was something that you had. They had responders. They had their own police that go out to a person when they're in crisis to be able to take that person to the hospital. They had their own unit that did that. But with funding cuts in the mental health department, they stopped all that. And now you don't have a responder that goes out when a person's in crisis mode. So where did that responsibility fall back on? Law enforcement. Now we're the ones going out doing the job that they had trained professionals to do, but they wanted to save money, so they did away with that. And now look at this, the situation we're dealing with mental illness. It's all over our country right now. And it's going to get worse because you got people coming back from the war, and that's suffering with PTSD and things of this nature. So this is something that when you start talking about defunding law enforcement, you will defund them on one side, but then you got to fund them to make sure that they're still available to be able to go out and do things that we're doing. But at the same time, we got to be very careful because you don't want to defund yourself out of a situation and then you lose good essential personnel that you'll never be able to get back once they go back and say, hey, look, we need to hire some more people because this problem is getting out of control. You ain't gonna be able to get people back. It's hard to hire people now. So we got to be very careful, and we got to walk that thin blue line as it relates to people talking about defunding us and defunding law enforcement. Because once you go back, you've seen in several states where they defunded police units, and now they want to go back and say, we need to put that money back. We need to hire more officers. I mean, we experienced here in Montgomery County, we had over 490 people shot. 78 of those died. We had 78 murders. First time in a long time we had that many murders in Montgomery, Alabama. I mean, we're breaking records right now with the number of shootings and the number of murders. So the violent crime is still going up, not to mention the other issues that we got to deal with on a daily basis. So we got to walk that thin blue line very, very, very closely as it relates to taking away money, taking away salaries and benefits, and then laying people off, and then later hoping that you can be able to replace those people. It's hard to replace somebody that's already trained and already knows his job. It's easier to go in there to give them more training on de-escalation. It's easier to go in there, give them training on crisis intervention training and things that they need to have to be able to handle those situations more knowledgeable instead of going in there thinking that we can still do things the same way. You can't put a time frame on answering a call now. Now, if you get to a call, it may take you an hour because it may take time for you to be able to talk a person out of a bad situation to make sure the outcomes turn out the way that you really want them to turn out. So defunding the police is, I think when they first came out with that, it was something that everybody caught on to. But now I want you to go back and look at all those cities and all those states that tried to do it. They're going back now trying to put more money into law enforcement to increase their presence, because when you lose that presence in the community, you lost something.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I appreciate you going into that elaborate detail as well as just kind of putting the facts right there on the table. The conversation should really shift from defunding the police, because as you mentioned, these are our first responders. These are the ones who are basically keeping the peace, protecting the citizens on a daily basis in different areas, different departments, just under the umbrella of law enforcement. But maybe, as you mentioned, probably case by case, looking to advancing the training, depending on what training is needed to improve how they execute their roles in a more efficient way, or just really being mindful of the fact that we can't exactly do an all or nothing approach when it comes to law enforcement. So I appreciate your input on that one. What actions do you believe need to be taken to improve trust between the community and law enforcement agencies?
Woo. I tell you, that's something gonna be hard because it's just like now. I told you I went to high school this morning and taught. I go to churches, I talk, I go to neighborhood watch, I go to town halls, I do all of this. But the thing that I always tell people when you're at a town hall meeting, the people that are attending the town hall meeting, those ain't the people that you need to really talk to. The people that are out there on the streets are the people that you really need to be able to talk to, the people you really need to be able to touch, because that's where the problem's at. So the actions that we have to do, we got to do a better job with the law enforcement is, like I always tell my guys and girls, hey, there's nothing wrong with smiling at a person. I mean, there's several times you go places, people look at you, they roll their eyes, they're mad at the world. You know, smile at them, speak, and keep walking. You know, if you show kindness, you know, hopefully that act of kindness will rub off and they'll say, well, dang, he ain't that bad, or she ain't that bad, and they'll speak back. But you're going to run into those instances where you got a lot of people that just hate the police. I can't change their attitude. I can't change their way in life. You know, I had a gentleman that just couldn't stand nothing about law enforcement. Couldn't stand nothing about law enforcement until a tragedy took place in his family. And then law enforcement was the person that had to come out and had to deal with that tragedy. And once they got out and they dealt with that tragedy and worked with that family, his whole outlook on us really changed because he had a bad experience back in the past. You painted everybody with the same brush, and you can't do that. I had bad experiences in the past. I didn't paint all of law enforcement with the same brush because of the way I was treated. So don't get me wrong. We got to push back and we got to get out. We got to talk. We got to educate people. We got to smile. Sometimes you're going to cry because it hits home, and it's starting to hit home a lot more because of the violence that you're starting to see in the community. I mean, we're not immune to it. So we got to be very careful the way that we respond to the community when they're in need, and make sure that they can see that it's just not a daily conversation. You want them to be able to understand that the things that you're saying is sincere and it's just not a daily talk.
It's definitely going to take some repeated intentional action on the part of not just the citizens, but the members of law enforcement to really strengthen that relationship. Because the last couple of years, it kind of has taken a couple shots here and there, but I do believe it should be able to be mended if more task force were able to kind of approach it in a manner that you are looking at it, to be open-minded about how we can have these conversations, have the tough conversations, even if we end up having to cry from time to time, but we're able to share with one another, and in hopes of just kind of mending that relationship with the citizens. I agree with you on that one, sure. With everything that is going on with social media, as you said, and technology, more and more people are able to access footage of live events right here and now, and it can be broadcasted to anywhere, you know, with the ease of technology. I'd love to get your opinion on the statement body cameras are shedding lights on issues compared to before. What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, well, we gotta have them. I mean, it's a game changer for us in law enforcement. I think when they first came out, people didn't want to embrace them. Your staff didn't want to embrace them, but it's a game changer. I mean, it's a must. We've had instances where the body camera was filming, and we had vehicle accidents where somebody pulled out in front of somebody, in front of one of the deputies, and we rammed the car, or a car cut across, and you hit them. And the first thing the person says, he ran into me. And then you say, well, no, he said you cut. No, that didn't happen. Then you replay the camera, and it's like, well, so, it's a game changer. And now I think the majority of your staff understand, and they know that as long as you're doing your job, and you got to do your job correctly, you just can't come out and do your job. You can't cuss everybody out. You can't be the big bad bully of the West. If you show compassion and you're doing your job the way it's supposed to be done, and then you're showing the ugly side of that person instead of the ugly side of you, it's a game changer. I mean, you got to have them now. It ain't if do you need them? No, you gotta have them. Body cameras it's a tool, and it's a piece of equipment just like your firearm. And if you don't have it, your agency will suffer. And I mean, that's just a must. And it's gotten to the point now that you're seeing body cameras not only on the street, but in your corrections facilities. Sometimes we always say that a person won't lie on you. They're just not telling the truth. But that body camera takes out all the doubt, and it takes out all of the questionable remarks. And did you say this? Did you do this? It's right here on recording. You can see it. So body cameras are a game changer for us in this career.
Definitely, like you said, improves the accountability, not just on the officers, but the citizens. Yeah. So that definitely kind of ties into the ability to improve trust as well. So it's literally right there in front of you. You can't really say that it's a lie. It's right in front of you, the body camera. And just to kind of lean into that a little bit, utilities, body cameras, body worn definitely help in that case, kind of offloading some of the pressure from the officer or the citizens with its automatic start and stop features, which is something we definitely wanted to be able to assist officers with so they can focus on their primary duty, which is to protect and serve as citizens. The final question I wanted to speak on was, what role does the effective use of body cameras and in-car systems play in carrying out your role, Sheriff, and improving community relations?
Oh, we love them. I mean, because there's not a week goes by that we're not referring to our video footage to be able to answer some questions or a doubt that somebody is trying to cast on your personnel. But then once they actually go back and they see it, and they're like, oh, he didn't tell me that, or she didn't tell me that. It really it's a beneficial tool. And I mean, just to be able to instill that public trust, especially once you show them what actually transpired. Used to, when body cameras and in-car cameras came out, people say, well, they doctored it. Now with technology and time stamped and automatic, it takes the human ability away from it. It automatically downloads. I mean, it takes all of the humanality out of it. So it's hard for somebody to come back and say, well, he doctored this or they doctored that. This is it. What you see is what you get. And this is what actually happened. So it really helps as far as on the public trust side for us in law enforcement. And, at the same time, if you got somebody out here doing wrong, it's going to show. and it's good because now that camera helped you make a decision that you kind of assume, but now it's bringing it to life, and it's going to help you get rid of those that don't really need to be wearing this badge. So that just instilled that public trust that we got to have.
I agree, definitely. Well, Sheriff Derrick Cunningham, on behalf of the entire Utility Inc. team, we appreciate you taking the time to speak with us this afternoon to discuss your perspectives on the African American experience in law enforcement. Your perspectives have not only shed light on the deeper issues being faced every day by law enforcement, but have also provided a guiding light to others in positions similar to yours on the best way to adequately address these critical issues moving forward, while also fulfilling their roles in partnership with the community, resolving issues that impact public safety. And I'd like to thank you. Thank you.